all for being here today. It is a huge honor for me to be here to introduce Miss Chelsea Oden. Chelsea is a music performance major, clarinet performance, music composition, and music education major in our department. She's involved in almost every ensemble, and an incredibly intelligent and talented young woman. I'm really excited about what she has to share with you today. Please welcome Miss Chelsea Oden.
What do we do with a drunken sailor? What do we do with a drunken sailor? What do we do with a drunken sailor early in the morning? Way, hey, and up she rises, way, hey, and up she rises, way, hey, and up she rises early in the morning. Bonnie was a warrior, way, hey, a warrior and a terrier, Jean-Francois. Bonnie went to Waterloo, away, hey, and there he met his overthrow, Jean-Francois. Johnny come down to high-low, poor old man. Awake her, a shaker, awake that gal with the blue dress on. And Johnny come down to high-low, poor old man. So those are three of the shanties, excerpts from three of the shanties that I'm going to be talking about today that Malcolm Arnold used in his three shanties for Woodwind Quintet. So I'd like to give you a little bit of an introduction to my title, The Idiosyncrasies of Folk Songs in the Classical Style. So what does all of this mean? So I have some definitions for you. An idiosyncrasy is a characteristic, habit, or mannerism peculiar to an individual. In this case, our individual is the folk song. Folk songs are the music which has developed and exists among the people as an integral part of their daily life. Malcolm Arnold was a fantastic 20th century British composer and symphonist. And a shanty is a work song sung by the crew of a large merchant sailing vessel. So, why are folk songs important? Dr. S.A.K. Durga, a prevalent ethnomusicologist, says that folk music is the first musical expression of men and women. This is a fundamentally and universally accepted concept. It is defined as the music which has developed as an integral part of the daily life of people. So it comes from just a raw essence of humanity in their daily lives, and so it's incredibly important. Some folk song characteristics. I have up here the melody of Drunken Sailor. You'll notice that it's fairly repetitious. That rhythm, continuous, definitely repetitious. Short and catchy. You might still be humming this later this evening. Distinct. You're not going to confuse this melody with that of Mary Had a Little Lamb. Non-operatic. And what I mean by non-operatic is the range stays within an octave, so most people could sing it. And there's no ornamentation. Let me give you an example of what I mean by ornamentation. I just played this tune straight, so as it's written. If I were to ornament it, it might sound like this. Sorry. So a little fancier. You're going to get some extra notes in there that you don't hear on ships when sailors are singing them as they're working. And then the words fit directly in with the melody. You'll notice there's really a note for every syllable in the tune. So let's talk about a specific type of folk song, the shanty. The shanty came from a very unique culture. I've listed several cultures up here, and that's because working on a ship was hard. It was tough. And so you had people who were desperate, seeking freedom on ships, and that was something that was common to many different cultures. So we had influences from several ethnicities. Even though you might think of a shanty as possibly having a prominent English origin, truly all of these cultures contributed to the melodies that we have and the words that we have in shanties. So I'm going to talk about three kinds of shanties. Stamp and go shanty is a drunken sailor is an example of that one. So this was used only on large sailing vessels because it was there that they had the largest crews and the largest equipment that they had to move. And so this was used whenever they needed constant force on something to be able to move it. And so it's very repetitious, it's continuous. So you'll hear that. They would sing Drunken Sailor if they were, say, hoisting a sail or an anchor. A short drag is, Bonnie was a warrior, as an example of that one. And so that was used when a short burst of force was needed. People had to pull all at the same time to be able to accomplish what it was that they were trying to do. And then we have some that were used for anything. They would be adapted to any sort of task that needed to be done on the ship. Johnny Come Down to Hilo is an example of that. And this one actually came to ships from African Americans who were escaping slavery. You'll find in your handout the authentic lyrics that African Americans would have sung on cotton plantations. And then you'll also find a modern version of the lyrics with, in parentheses, clean version. Now I have to say, whenever I was looking for a clean version of these lyrics, it was very difficult. This melody was sent out to sea with a bunch of bored sailors for several months. And what did we get? But if you want to look that up, you be cautioned, be cautioned. But that is all I will say about that. So here are a couple pictures of some sailors working on a ship. This could have been, they could have used a stamp and go shanty here, or a short drag shanty. You can see they, maybe they would align to pull at the same time. This would have definitely been a stamp and go shanty. They're applying continuous force to raise the anchor. And I would like to invite you to join me in experiencing what it would have actually been like to encounter a shanty on board. So often they had someone who was designated as a shantyman, and he was very good at improvising. So he would improvise verses, and everybody knew the chorus. And so the way this would work is I'll give you an example of the first two lines, and then we'll try it all together. So if I'm the shantyman, I would say, Bonnie was a warrior, and you all would say, away, hey, ya. And I've underlined the last syllable because the last syllable of that line is when everyone would pull together. So let's give it a try, and we'll put all 4 lines together. Are you ready, crew? Bonnie was a warrior, away, hey, ya. A warrior and a terrier, Jean-Francois. Yeah, that was awesome. We should go sailing, guys. That was fantastic. All right, so this brings me to another important medium that the folk song took precedence in. And it occurred with the political movement called nationalism. The folk song that we just sung, the shanty we just sung, was actually about Napoleon Bonaparte, and it describes his life. So if you're looking at the lyrics in your handout, you can kind of see how it describes his biography. After the Napoleonic Wars, the Congress of Vienna met in 1814 to 1815, and they decided to redraw a bunch of national boundaries in Europe without much consideration for the people that lived in those nations. And so this caused a lot of outrage and rebellion, and people felt a need to express their patriotism, which naturally manifested itself in art and music. So composers began to turn to folk songs that were at the core of the cultures that people felt they needed to express they belonged to, and use those in their compositions as an expression of patriotism and of where people came from. So here's a political comic about how some people felt about nationalism, cutting up the world, if you will. And here's a list of some nationalistic composers. I'm going to draw your attention to Jean Sibelius from Finland, because I will mention him later. But you'll notice many of the composers who have earlier dates are closer to Europe. And so this movement really started in Europe, and then it began to cross continents, and people from nations across the world wanted to express their cultures as well. So this leads us to Sir Malcolm Arnold. Here's a picture of Mr. Malcolm Arnold. 1921 to 2006, he only passed away recently. He had many honors and achievements. On here, I'm going to highlight honorary doctorates of music, which he received from 8 universities. 8 universities, incredible, right? Between Europe and the United States, so not just one One Nation. Also, the Ivor Novello Award was given for service to British music, specifically. And then the Incorporated Society of Musicians Distinguished Musician Award was only given to someone who had contributed a lifetime of music to the time. And so that was just an incredibly prestigious award. Let's talk a little bit about his music. So I mentioned Sibelius earlier. Many critics compared his work to that of Sibelius. It has the same light, catchy, dramatic feel to it. Almost all of his pieces feel like they belong in a movie. And he was actually also a film score composer. He was the first British composer to receive an Oscar for a film score, which is pretty cool. Among all of these works up here, I'm going to highlight his chamber works, because that's what the Three Shanties is. It's in that category. He was feeling a bit like a sailor that day, I think. So the Three Shanties for Woodwind Quintet. He wrote this in 1943. It was premiered by the London Philharmonic Orchestra's Wind Quintet, and it was actually first played in an airplane hangar at lunchtime. It's definitely exemplary of Malcolm Arnold's most beloved works, and I think you'll hear that whenever we play it for you at the end. So it's in 3 movements. The first movement features the drunken sailor, and the marking allegro con brio means fast and with joy. The second movement, literally, is a little slower and simple. And the third movement, allegro vivace, is fast and lively. So now let's take a look at some of the idiosyncrasies of how Malcolm Arnold incorporated the folk songs into this work. So the first one, you'll recall that I said that folk songs tended to stay contained within an octave so that most people could sing them. Whenever you jump into a classical instrumentation, like the Wind Quintet, we suddenly have the opportunity to play in a lot of different ranges. And so Brianna is going to demonstrate an octave displacement of a melody from the second movement. So that's in 1 octave. Here's the next one. And you'll notice she threw a little ornamentation in there, which is now also possible in the classical ensemble. Malcolm Arnold was also a fan of using a lot of different styles. So we have a tango that the drunken sailor experiences in the first movement, and Rose is going to play that bass line just so you can get the tango feel. And then we're going to play the rest of that so you can see how it fits in. Malcolm Arnold was also fond of waltzes, but I know you'll hear that whenever we play it. So I'm going to move on to the rumba, which he features in the third movement. Rose is also going to demonstrate that bass line for you. And so the first rhythm here, the first measure, is the rhythm that Rose is playing. And so that you can hear that in context, so there's a bit of the rumba from the third movement. Additionally, Malcolm Arnold was able to incorporate some really interesting harmonies. Harmony wasn't intentionally used on ships by sailors, though it might have accidentally come about. Malcolm Arnold's harmony was very intentional. We're going to play the first 2 chords of the first movement, just so you can hear the kind of harmonies that he used. The first one is actually analyzable as a G minor 9 chord. The second chord is what we would call a modern harmony. It doesn't have a function beyond its color that it gives to the piece. So we're going to play them rhythmically and then sustain them so that you can hear the full harmony, and then we'll build them up so that you can hear each note. And then if we build them so that you can hear each note. It's a very jazzy chord. And that one has a lot of tension in it. So, oh, yeah, okay. So another thing that becomes possible in this ensemble is, as you heard, we arpeggiated that chord as we built it up. You heard a lot of different tone colors from us individually. So there are a lot of different colors we can create as a group that Malcolm Arnold took advantage of. And so just so you can hear that, we're going to play a couple of excerpts where there are different instrumentations happening, which creates a different tone color coming from the group as a whole. So that was flute, bassoon, and clarinet. And that was clarinet, oboe, and horn. The clarinet tends to blend in well with other instruments, so you can kind of hear how he fit it into those contrasting timbres. And finally, he used a lot of different textures. And what I mean by musical texture is, let me give you an example of what a monophonic texture would be. So a monophonic texture is the way sailors would have sung this, all one line, all singing the same thing. A homophonic texture is a melody with an accompaniment. So you do hear a melody, but it's supported by something different. We're going to demonstrate a polyphonic texture, which is how Malcolm Arnold opens this piece. And it sounds rather fugal. There are a lot of different parts happening all at the same time. That was exciting. Sailors didn't normally do that because then everything fell apart, right? Land ahoy. So before we play the full piece for you, I just want to mention a couple of things. The music that you're about to hear comes from the creative genius of Malcolm Arnold, from the decks of ships, from many different cultures, from influential political events that inspired people, and ultimately from the human experience. So I'll ask you to hold your applause until we finish playing, and I'm going to put up some fun program notes I found that someone brilliantly wrote about this piece. Oh, can you guys see through my board? Yeah. Special thanks to all of these people. Thank ye kindly. And here are my sources. Does anyone have any questions? I can take questions now. Oh my goodness. Yeah?
Would you consider today's music to be the folk songs of the future?
That is a great question. You know, the reason folk songs became important in a compositional medium was because they became more important for a greater reason at the time. Does that make sense? So like they were really important in nationalism. So I feel like for today's music to survive, it has to have a greater significance that's tied into the humanity of what it means to be living today. So it's totally possible that like 100 years from now somebody will write a symphony using Lady Gaga's, you know, variation on, I don't know. But I think that's unlikely. I think that the music that expresses what is fundamentally human is what composers turn to later, whenever they're looking to write something that means something. Is that what you were asking?
Well, yeah.
Kind of. Okay.
Songs about that though, like human experience.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Yes, they are.
I would imagine people are going to know who the Beatles are 200 years from now, but I don't know. I mean, like, how many songs do you think are going to be remembered 200 years from now?
Well, there will be a lot more people, so maybe more than we think now. Maybe. I don't know. That is an interesting question. It's really that is something that's interesting to think about. I don't know the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's really cool to think about. Oh my goodness.